Hello and welcome to Black Economic TV. We have with us today Albert Owusu. Albert is going to speak to us about his book, Consequential Management System, Africa's first governance innovation designed to embed consequence literacy, mindset awareness, and accountability into institutions. His career bridges global finance and African transformation, having mobilized over $100 million in institutional growth capital across the country. Through CMS, he fuses African metaphysical wisdom with modern management science, creating practical tools, dashboards, scorecards, and simulations. These equip leaders to make transparent decisions, measure outcomes, and drive sustainable transformation. Now, I've got to admit, I had to look up metaphysics. So let me just talk about that a little. The branch of philosophy that deals with first principles of things is called metaphysics. It includes abstract concepts such as being, knowing, identity, time, and space. It examines the basic structure of reality. It's traditionally seen as the study of mind-independent features of the world, but some theorists view it as an inquiry into the conceptual framework of human understanding. Welcome, Albert. How are you?
Thank you very much. I'm very well, thank you, Dawn. Thank you for having me on here.
Oh, thank you for agreeing to come on. That sounds like a wonderful body of work that you prepared in this book. So please explain a little bit more around the book, what it's hoped that it will do, and also tell us about metaphysics.
Okay, thank you. So let me start with the metaphysics. It's a mouthful. So metaphysics, as you rightly said, it's about, for me, worldview or of being, identity, worldview. So what do I mean by worldview? Metaphysics basically helps humans to understand, the age-old question, who are we? What are we doing here? What's the purpose of life? So it's conceptual, how the ancestors looked at life, and then they sort of built their communities around it from, thousands and thousands of years ago. So currently, the ones that I'm familiar with there are Eastern metaphysics, which is really the Chinese, the Indians, they have their metaphysics. There is the Jewish metaphysics, there's Western metaphysics, and there's African metaphysics. But what has happened because of slavery and colonialism, African metaphysics was almost destroyed because Africans or black, when I talk about Africans, I mean anybody who's black, were made to believe that the metaphysics was mambo jumbo, it was nonsense. So in the last 50 years, African intellectuals have brought it back. The work goes further back. By the last 50 years, they have really made it grounding, and it's made a comeback. And it's now accepted that, yes, there is an African worldview. So for me, once I sort of learned about this some years ago, and this journey has been a journey, and I'll go into that later. So that is when I began to understand what is African metaphysics. So when you understand that, for instance, African metaphysics is interconnectedness, it is reciprocity, it is communal agency. So for you, if you notice, Black people are somebody who are very together, like community, family, even a wider family. That all stems from that, even though it was, if you like, whatever has happened. Western metaphysics, now this is very interesting for me, is individualism. separation, competition, them versus us. That is Western metaphysics. So for me, looking at this, it made a lot of sense to me, because you look at Western metaphysics and you look at the everything that's happening even currently in the world, and everything, the history. It's about them versus us. It's about individualism. The individual takes center stage and tries to acquire as much as they like for themselves or what they want. In African metaphysics, and I'll give you an example, around the year 1800 or so, when the Dutch were rampaging across South Africa, they were fighting these wars and conquering one village after the other. So they came across this chief who had quite a big village, and he wanted to save his people, because he said, look, they have guns, and the way these guns, you can't even get close to them because we're using swords and spears. And I don't want my people to be slaughtered like that. So he went and spoke to them. And then the leader of the forces, the Western forces, said, well, I want all this land. And then he said, well, what do you mean? I want all this land. He said, yeah, all this land is mine. I'm going to take that off you as part of the peace deal. And he says, don't be ridiculous. The land is held in trust for the people, communal agency. What was happening there was the clash of two worlds. Here was a worldview, which is all about the individual, take as much as you want. And here was another worldview about community, about stewardship. So for me, that was a huge contrast. So that's something I've delved into. So when I talk about metaphysics, I talk about African metaphysical wisdom. And when you look at it, it's about reciprocity, stewardship, rotation, communal agency. Those are the bedrocks of it. And there's a lot to it, of course. So I've looked at that, and then I've looked at if you look at Black people or Africans, what has happened is that we're individuals because of the Western imposed worldview, which we have adopted. So it makes collaboration very difficult amongst Black people.
Really?
Yeah, I believe this is the root cause of what has happened. That is what I think this is at the core of it. And I think in another day we can have a discussion about, well, how come in the West they don't have this issue? But there's a very good reasons for that. But that's not why we're here today. The focus is on Africans and the book. So that is what it is. So I believe there's been a clash, and it's ontological. And what has happened is the core of Africans, as it were, was systematically, deliberately, use whatever word one wants to use, taken away or destroyed or whatever. And I think this is key in people understanding it, because once you understand it, then you can make the choice that, okay. So in the book, you will find that I talk about mindset awareness as a perspective. There are two perspectives. Mindset awareness.
I'm putting the book on the screen now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Go on.
Yeah. There's mindset awareness and impact implementation. So mindset awareness for me is all about how, with perhaps a different knowledge, new knowledge, one then begins to look at their own thought processes. And, you know, so you have consequence literacy. Within that, you have mindset literacy, and then you have meta awareness. So what I've looked at is how, as people, we now need to really begin to look at why we do what we do. Because for me, I've looked at the outcomes. You have to look at your outcomes. What are your outcomes as Africans over the last 100 years, over the last 200 years, over the last 50 years? There's a lot of information there for anybody to look at. So if those outcomes are not really uplifting you, it's always easy, because I believe, you know, it's easy to point the finger at somebody else, but perhaps we need to start with ourselves. And you start that with your mindset awareness, where, for instance, if you're finding it difficult to collaborate with others, how do we overcome that? The ethos of the book.
Well, there's some things I want to pick out. So, for
Yes.
instance, you talk about accountability measures. So,
Yeah.
is this, for instance, where there will be a list of targets and people are measured against those targets over a period of time?
Right. So a little bit of that, yeah, is and that is done in the Western frameworks. But I guess what is slightly different about this is that, so for instance, if I take some of the challenges in Africa right now, is that, and I'll come to some of the deeper things on this in a bit, but in Africa right now is that the state-owned enterprises are mismanaged. And it's a huge problem, especially in Ghana right now. The state-owned enterprises are under the spotlight for mismanagement. So when I talk about accountability, it's about working with executives, working with universities, for us to understand that if you live, and again, taking African metaphysical wisdom, you come from the community, right? And you're put into a state-owned enterprise to run it. One of the things that I think Western frameworks have done about individualism is that the focus is on, I'm there, I've got to try and make as much money, take out as much as I can for myself and my friends and family, and then that's it. But in African metaphysical wisdom and communal agents, who we are, the individual is, because of the community, is almost inseparable. You are part of that community. So you cannot then go and sit in a state-owned enterprise, run it to the ground. And the question I say, you know, when I get the opportunity to do these workshops would be, you tell me that you love your children, you love your grandchildren, you love your friends, you love your community. But if you're running it to the ground, it's just a question of time when your children will not even have a job to come to, right? And this is where some of the accountability is going to come in. So we need to work through the mindset, and then the accountability is that we will use technology, AI tools. That will be the next stage, where we can build dashboards, scorecards, and yes, performance indicators. So in this case, the government will have to make these metrics available, where the citizens, the community can go on and actually see that the CEO who's been put there is actually there and is acting in the interest of the community. Yeah. So it becomes participatory governance, right? So this is what I'm saying, is that this is what Africans were doing before our history was interrupted, right? And we must, of course, life has moved on and we must embrace modernity. But some of these old age things, I think they're timeless in stewardship, in communal agency, reciprocity, rotation. There. And so these are some of those things that are going to be embedded there. So people will see, and again, so that's where the consequence literacy is. So right at the beginning, when you get the job, there will be AI simulations, tools, consequence mapping that you yourself will fill in before you do it, right? So the community can see, today, this is what you're saying. Well, in a year's time, what is actually happening? What are you actually doing? How are you benefiting the community? Where you have situations where the roads, most of the roads are not very well done. You have, electricity challenges, you have water challenges, and all of this is due to mismanagement. There isn't any other word for it, right? So it's about how we tackle that, but it has to be tackled as a community. And yeah, so that I think that people cannot just sit there anymore when they now know the community is going on there and checking what they're doing. After 2 years, you'll be sitting in that position, and well, yeah.
Okay.
So it's slightly different.
And what is blended finance mechanism?
Right. So blended finance mechanisms are tools or financing ways which are being used in this modern era. So we have things like catalytic first loss. So you can have a business or an institution, and these days there's so much money around the world, there will be institutions who are ready to put money into it to help it get to a stage where you can even attract investment banks. So they're ready to take some losses. Yeah, so there's all sorts of hybrid ways of financing that we can do. So there's lots of different ways in which we can do it, that we can structure it. And that, even this framework that I've created, this governance framework, at the other side of it next year, what I want to be able to also do is that this is going to be the first African governance framework which has the capacity to attract investment. Okay, so the framework itself can attract investment. So we can create impact bonds. So we create bonds, we can collateralize them against resources and use that for development. But what is different about this is that it will be the private sector and the government partnering, but it is totally private sector led, right? But then because the government is in there as well, and with the participatory governance, it will all be pretty transparent. And I believe that this is a way in which one can scale the development of Africa. For my wider vision, which I don't know if I'll live to see that, but because I think it's in the future, but then who knows, is that I think Africa is the home for all Black people. And we must build Africa that any Black person anywhere in the world who wants to come back can come back. Because we all see how people with dark skin are treated across the world, and I think we need to do better. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got to say, even if a large number of Black people of the diaspora decide to come back to Africa, it doesn't necessarily mean it'll be a utopia. I
No.
remember someone, a family member actually living in Liberia, reported how there were two factions within the country. Those who had never been taken into slavery, and then those who had been taken into slavery but came back to Liberia um, from the USA. So then you have
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
who have been affected by being in the West, with those living peaceably, I've got to say, but not in harmony.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they weren't fights as such, but they weren't living in harmony. They kept themselves together because one group had experienced life in the USA and the other group had never been any place. And I think at some points there might have been civil unrest as well. So
Sure.
it's important to remember that even if people do go back to Africa, it doesn't mean it's going to be this wonderful utopia and
Yeah.
everybody's all
Yeah.
hugging
Yeah.
each
And
other,
live
because
happily
yeah,
ever after. No.
one
No.
group will think they're better than the other group because they lived in
Yeah.
the West,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and
Yeah.
another group will try and dominate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I also want to pull out the fact that what you are proposing will require some brainwashing, or you would say training, lots of workshops, conferences, discussion. But in a sense, you're having to change the mindset of people who are in leadership, people
Yeah.
who are in power,
Yeah.
people who have the opportunity now to press a button and a million goes to their bank account. And they know that they might not be found out, or by the time they're found out, it's too late.
Yeah.
So, how do you plan to go about this brainwashing exercise?
So what I am looking to do now is that I'm talking to universities here, where I want to first embed this framework into their MBA programs. So I'll have a section for the undergrads, then a big piece in the MBA, and then another piece for the exec MBAs. So what can happen now is that we can have a whole generation coming up who are not going to repeat the colonialist mindset that had been left in African leadership, though it's unconscious. So that is how, for me, I am looking to do it, and I would need a lot of people to collaborate with, to work with, because what I want to do is to be able to scale, accelerate it at pace. Because one of the things, and I'll come back. Okay, let me finish the question and I'll actually go further. So that is for the youth, and I think they're the future. So that's quite important. So I'm open to collaborations on that. And the way I want to do this is east, west, Southern Africa, go into it like that. Now in the USA, the UK, other places too, in terms of how we can do that to disseminate that. I'm open to collaborating how we can do that. Because again, as you said, In one case, you'll be dealing with slavery issues. In one case, you're dealing with colonialism issues, and how you tie all that up. But one thing that I was going to go into, and I think this thing here, people haven't really, because for me, I don't hear politicians talking about it, right? So that tells me, look, we are not even paying attention to what is coming. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is that since the Second World War, you've had it's like a bipolar world, which has been the USA, the USSR, and then USSR disintegrated, it became Russia, and then it just became a unipolar world with the USA. But as you see what Donald Trump is doing, and you see what Russia, China, South Africa, the other group that has formed, what's it called, BRICS, what they're doing, that now tells you the world is shifting from one dominant power, the USA. I don't think at this stage, my focus is on Africa. So the world is shifting into a multipolar world. And I think that the old system had, in a way, I think the multipolar world is even more dangerous for Africa if Africans haven't got their act together. That is what I mean. So this is why I think this is very, very important, and it needs to be done, and it needs to be done at pace.
Yes, understood. You pick out some areas. You said there are practical tools to transform leadership. Now, you mentioned about getting this information to universities, and I would say that maybe that means about 10% of the population might eventually get the training and teaching and understand the frameworks you're putting out. But then that still leaves another 90% of people to persuade. I would have thought it's more urgent to get to the leaders, the current leadership, and try and transform their methods of thinking. Because it kind of worries me, because I know some African leaders are in power for like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So, as you rightly said, you're not sure if you're going to be around when this change you suggest actually happens, because some politics in Africa takes too long to change. It's a bit like you got this big giant ship, and in order for it to shift and change direction, it might take 5 or 10 years. It almost can't be done overnight. Or have you come up with a solution for it to be done within, say, 2 years, within 5 years? Is there a solution that you've given in this book that can force people, leaders who are currently in power, to make the changes necessary?
Yes, if you go to, I think, chapter 11, I lay out a whole framework strategy. I pick around 6 sectors of the economy and how they can do that, so that they can look at that. In terms of reaching those leaders, I am open to collaboration, because the way Africa again works is all about, if I can collaborate with other people to open those doors for me, then I will be able to do that. I have a whole team of consultants. I have affiliations with other consultants, though, with some of the big four, the Western institutions. But as I go forward, I'm really aiming to bring in, African or Black consultants to be able to do that. Because the more people, consultants around me who now fully understand this, the better it is. that one can scale. So yes, I'm open to that. So there's workshops, there's all sorts of things that I have. So I will share some of that with you for you to have a look, and then had to see whether there are people that can collaborate with me to roll this out.
Well, yeah, you're going to need a lot of collaboration because this is a big
Yes,
task. It's a noble
yes,
task that you've set about, I've got to say.
it's huge. It's
Yeah,
huge.
and I have no doubt that is possible, but how you're going to go about it, that's going to be a big task. It's also a marketing task as well because everybody needs to know about what is going on and how to fix it. And we know that these countries, many of these countries, have electricity issues. You're quite right. You have countries selling oil, and yet somehow more than half of the country hardly has electricity.
Yeah.
And that in itself slows down the progress of that country because if you have no power, there's certain things you can't do. Someone said to me
Yeah.
the other day, "Oh, that means half the country can't use computers, half the country
Mhm.
can't use AI," and
Yeah.
some are going to find that the gap between the West and Africa might be widening, not shortening.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a big task, Albert. Are you really sure you want to do this?
Well, it's very clear for me the steps I need to take, and as I see these issues, what was going on, as one takes notice. And I once saw a situation, a cripple who, was in a situation that they shouldn't be in. Um, and that really did bug me that, as a cripple, that she doesn't have a wheelchair. How is this possible for her to move around? And I had to then look within myself that how can I help? And for me, the how came to me later on in all sorts of different ways. And I realized that I had it within me because my whole career, I have been very blessed. I've been very privileged. I've worked around frameworks. I've used a lot of Western frameworks. So I understand frameworks. So that is what then got me thinking that what I see is that a lot of the frameworks we're using in Africa is all foreign frameworks.
Mm.
We're using English, again, that's not even our language. And perhaps part of the issue is all around that. So we need to create our own. And that is what got me onto this journey in creating our own, and then being able to, because as you said, everybody's talking about the issues. Everybody knows what the issues are, and everybody is what is how do you bridge it? And I believe this is the first step. As I said, the impact bonds is going to be something that's really going to help, because you can then create a self-financing tool for development. Yeah.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that tackles a huge problem
Yeah.
that is there already. And then you look to then educate the young people. And you're totally right. We need to educate the C-suite executives and the leaders as well.
Mm.
But you
Mm.
see, the issue is this. When you look at like colonialism, what I've seen, the impact for me being here, I see the impact of it. And the impact, I think it is subtle, it is unconscious, It's in the education system, and that needs to be looked at. So in the book, I do spend some time giving my suggestions in terms of how we need to tackle that. And then, you know, it's in the architecture. It's everywhere. And let me give you an example. The book, I just go back one. The book, this is the first part. As I said, it's a big task. So this is the first book. There's book 2 and book 3 yet to come.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So this one is tackling an immediate issue. Frameworks, governance frameworks. Let's fix it. Let's be more effective. Let's create jobs. Because the youth, there's so many of them, they don't have jobs. And they are trying to get to Europe, dying on the Mediterranean and all those tragic things. And we have to be able to look for ways in which this is addressed. And I think this is a good way for us to do that. So immediately we can tackle that. The book 2, that one is about, and it says that if you go on the Amazon, it says down there is transformation and elevation. Now I dive a bit deeper into some of the roots of the issues, you know, Africans, Black people face today, and how one needs to then look to deal with that. So, for instance, around the year, and this is a true story, you can check it out, anybody can check it out, and they can always email me once they've done that. In the year 1819, right? So now slavery's been going for like about 200 years or so. And in book 2, I'll go even further back because, you know, before I even carry on, I'm not sure a lot of people, not everybody knows this, but until the 1600s, and even the 1600s, that's when it started. If you go back to the year 1400, 1200, Roman times, Egyptian times, and you said to them that, oh, somebody is a different color to you, and that's an issue, or you try that, people probably want to send you to the asylum because they won't know what you're talking about. It didn't exist. So now you come back to my story. In 1819, this Englishman called Thomas Bowditch, he works for this merchant company who is sailing up and down the coast of West Africa, and they record everything that's going on. The British have been trying to obviously conquer with the others a lot of their strong African kingdoms. One of it was the Ashanti Empire. It's really Ashanti Empire. The British didn't know how to say Ashanti, so they call it Ashanti. So the Ashanti Empire. So this guy, Thomas Bowditch, enters Kumasi, but he goes alone. And because he goes alone, he's allowed passage. He's not killed. Because those days, if you try and go near the cities, they will just be killed. We will not even be allowed to get near. So he enters the city and he is fascinated, and this is from his own writing, that the streets are all well lined up, right? The compounds is all 2-story. And he said, wow, how do you have flushable toilets on the second floor or first floor, depending how you refer to it, right? Europe didn't start having flushable toilets until the 1850s. This is in the year 1819. So the people there did find him amusing. And they would just laugh. And then he got near to the king's palace. He went in, he checked everything out. He went back to Europe. He came back, he went to the crown, and he said, look, I can show you how to defeat these people, but you need to pay me. But he wasn't an aristocrat. So they said, no, we're not paying you. So when he comes out, he goes to the newspapers and says, well, I'm going to write this and then I'll sell it. And then he got a message straight, the powers that be, don't you dare. The public is not to know this.
Really?
This is true story, yes. Go and do the research. The public is not to know this. So he was so dejected, because by now too, his company, he had lost that job, right? Because he went there and he's trying to make money, he's trying to make his fortune. He goes back to West Africa with his family. And within a year, he catches malaria and dies. He wrote this in 1819, so I don't know, it's not clear in the story when he returned back to England, but he died in 1824 in West Africa. In 1823, the British attacked the Asante for the first time with the information he gave them.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So that was the first Asante-Anglo war, which
wow.
the British lost. The British lost that war.
Really?
Yes, the British lost that war. The Asantes captured the British general. His name was Sir Charles McCarthy, and we executed him. Now it's just to send a message, don't come back. Right? Because the Asantes too were very aware. They had guns. We didn't have that. But they were real warriors, so they were able to defeat them the first time. But that wasn't to work. They kept coming back. So 5 wars later, yes, 5 wars. And the first war lasted 7 or 8 years. And then around 1874, the British entered Asante, the Kumasi, the capital, for the first time, and they burnt it to the ground. They told the king, you cannot rebuild your city. This is something too that was done in the kingdom of Dahomey in 1897. If you do the research, it will tell you they had splendid palaces and everything. So what was happening was the strategy where you destroy the architecture. In 100 years, the people who come don't see the ancestors didn't do anything. So just tell them that they just did mambo jumbo, right? And you just believe it, right?
Wow.
And that would have a bearing on how you see yourself in this world, right? So this is something that has happened. Let me also just say something. Within these books, because of the research I have done, is that when I learned the Chinese, they have, as I've said, they have a different metaphysics. It's similar to the African one, but it's slightly different. They have their education system and everything they do is totally different to what we know in the West. It's a totally different framework, different way of being. But look at what they're doing, right? And that's what convinced me the African metaphysics worldview was valid, because what you hear today And I've had to do this because I've gone on this journey on a lot of WhatsApp platforms. I'm having to disprove people. I said, no, you're saying things that you have no evidence to back, and I can give you the evidence. And what do I mean? People say, oh, well, in old Africa, they were just like living in huts and trees. They don't have any mathematics. And I said, no. Africans were doing mathematics. But it is not the Western way. The Western way, they do all their whatever, they write it down. That's not what we were doing. If you go to China and have a look at what they're doing, it's very different to what the West are doing. That doesn't mean what they are doing is invalid.
Yes.
And what, right? You see the reasoning. So if you look at a lot of the architecture that we had before, it was all, it was more, it was, there were, you could see arithmetic in it. In terms of harvesting, Africans had calendar, it was 28 or 29 days. And they would do their rituals, and they knew when things were coming, the seasons and everything. They could time everything to perfection because they used their calendar. That is mathematics, right? Rotational susu. That is mathematics because they were doing the proper rotational susu where they can have 500 people in a community, right? And systematically, everybody gets paid and everybody pays into it. None of this business today, oh, people do what they do. No. Remember, it's like the old word Ubuntu, I am because we are. And in those days, you lived it.
Yeah.
You are because you are in that community, right? So yes, we had mathematics. We had all those things. As I said in my books, I'll give all the evidence for people to see it. And it is this that I believe will restore the value in Africans or people of Black origin, that no, your history was deliberately erased. That doesn't mean it didn't exist. It does exist.
Yes, yeah.
That is that.
Interesting. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks for sharing on that. About the book, why did you write it now? Is this something you've been thinking about for years and then you finally got around to it? Tell me, why now?
Why now? I think the world is shifting. I see even across. You look at what is happening now. You look at what is happening in America. This extreme right wing. You see what is creeping into Europe, in the UK, across Europe, is there. And the crux of it, a lot of it is, we don't want Black people. Nobody's going to say it to your face, right? That's what you're looking at. So, but it cuts across other races and other people. I'm not saying it's just for Black people, but And then I looked at, for me again, I looked at the Mediterranean, what the young people are having to go through, almost dehumanized, and I found it disturbing.
You mean the
and
way that
also,
they're crossing the deserts to come on the boats
yes,
to Europe and the
yeah,
UK?
yeah, and some of the boats, even the desert, they are killing them. The people there, the traders, yeah, they just kill a lot of them. They don't even make it to the sea. And even when they get to the sea, some of these rafts they are on, they are not seaworthy. So the people who put them on it, they don't even get on it because they know halfway it's going to sink. And then it just sinks. Sometimes there's 200 people, babies, and and it is quite, for me, it's disturbing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you see, if you appreciate um 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 I guess the universe, we are all human beings. It's only by privilege that some of us we can say we've done this, we've achieved this. I don't think there's nothing special about anybody. I don't think you should ever lie to yourself as a human being. It's just by sheer luck. Yeah.
Mm.
So whatever they're going through, that could be you, right? That could be you.
Oh,
And
oh yeah, absolutely.
yeah, so that's how. And also on the other side too, I think too in Africa too, there is a change. The young people are asking for change. They're calling for it. So the environment appears that it is conducive for something like this.
Mm.
So yeah, and that's why I've started this journey. And I
Okay.
also think that my whole life had been leading to this. I think this is yeah, it's a great thing to be doing. It's a great time for me.
Okay, great. Well, are you looking at sending a copy of this book to all the leaders across Africa?
That is the plan. So the plan now is next year, end of January. I am looking for hopefully sponsorship. So if there are any sponsors who can help me do this, I'll be very, very grateful to do a book launch. I want to do a book launch in Accra at the Du Bois Center, W-E-B Du Bois. At the end of his life, Kwame Nkrumah invited him to come to Ghana. So he came to live in Nkrumah. This is the
Oh,
Pan-Africanist, yeah, the African-American Pan-Africanist, W-E-B Du Bois. So the
okay.
home that he lived in, the African-American community have turned into like a center that when they come, they visit it, other people visit it. So for the launch of such a book, I thought that would be great to do it there because for me,
Mm.
it's all about creating a better continent, Africa, and a bridge to Africa's diaspora. Started also sending some books to some people. But yeah, you're right. That's a strategy that I need to do is probably get one to every African leader. I've sent it to some strategic leaders I'm hoping I can work with.
Right. So you're providing a solution and you're saying that if people follow the framework that you're suggesting, funding can come with that to actually make things happen. But
Yeah,
everything needs to be transparent. So if they spend $10, $100, $10 million, we need to see where that money went, whose bank account it went to, and
yeah,
everybody needs to be accountable. So I think
yeah,
it sounds good. Thank you
yes,
for that. Tell me about
yes.
yourself. Give me let's go back a bit. Give me an idea
Yeah, okay,
about your own background from
okay,
childhood through to teenagers, your education. Tell us up to this stage what your journey has been.
okay. So I am the second born of five boys. My mother just had boys. Yes. So you could tell her work was cut out.
Well, I'm sure
Uh,
Daddy was happy.
yeah. Yeah. And my parents were in the UK in the 50s because they came to study, but then they returned. So my elder brother, he's dead now, the firstborn. Um, he was born there. And my mom was like about 4 or 5 months pregnant with me. And my dad said, no, um, I don't want any more of my children being born in the UK in a foreign land. So let's go back to Ghana. So
Okay.
they brought me back here. Yeah. So my father was an educated man. So he worked for oil company like Texaco, which was here. So he's one of the directors and everything. So I had quite in the 70s, I had quite a privilege upbringing. I went to good schools in Ghana.
Mm, mm,
And also, my lineage is that I am Asante. That's where I come from. But my dad was the Mpabuahene for the Asante-Hene. So the Asante king, the person who was in charge of all his footwear was my dad. And again,
Really?
so yes, so my dad sat on his, advisory council, like his close people. And the story is that around the year 1680 to 1700, because our history is not written, this is what we know. The first Mpabuahene, who was the brother of the one who was in charge of the Asante-Hene's clothing, weaved a footwear for him. And the Asante-Hene loved it so much and appointed him. And so one succession after the other has led to my dad.
Mm.
Yeah, and he was on the throne. He was on the throne for about 60 years before he died. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah. So we're connected to the royal home. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's a different branch. Yeah. 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 So but because the lineage, the way you inherit it is that ours is maternal. So it's a different system. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
So,
I went. Yeah,
sorry, go on.
to the UK. I came to the UK to finish my education, and I was very, very blessed. I worked for UBS, Swiss Bank UBS back then in the 80s. I've worked on a London Stock Exchange. I worked for Barclays Bank in the retail commercial sector. I worked as an AVP, a VP, and I left. Yeah, and then I've been in finance, raising investments for institutions in Africa, and offering technical advice, and that again opened my eyes a lot. I am married. I have 3 children of my own and one. So there's 4 children. They're all big, and yeah. So that is me.
So, in your teenage years, what career were you thinking that you would follow?
Well, when I was young, I think I did think about banking. I think I did think
Oh, you
about
did?
banking.
Oh, wow. And you
Yes,
followed
and then I
through.
went. Yes, and I ended up doing that. Yeah, I did
Oh,
think about being a bank manager, and I became a bank manager eventually.
oh, you did? Okay. That's
Yes,
good. Well done.
yes.
Well done.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. I'm looking at your LinkedIn now. You did an article called Africa Stands at the Crossroads,
yes.
not between progress and failure, but between cosmetic reforms and a deeper transformation. The real danger isn't just poor governance, it is intellectual dishonesty and the system of repackaging shallow ideas, abandoning momentum, and chasing the next short term fad. Well, I think that sums up the situation perfectly. Goodness. Oh, it's actually quite damning as well.
There isn't any
Wow.
other way to put it. There isn't any other way to put it. I think, to make a nice omelette, you don't have any choice but to break the eggs. And I think that, though it is damning and it might be unpleasant, what I think is that, let me give you an example. The Chinese, there is something happening right now. The Chinese in the 80s or 90s, early 90s, they built a theater for Ghana. This theater is in a prime area in Ghana. And every weekend, every day, the people who manage it rent it out. There's concerts, there's shows. People pay money to use it, right?
Yeah.
This building has fallen into decay where it's almost going to just not be used anymore. Yet,
Wow.
yes, yet the managers are collecting money for it, right? So the Chinese then come back and say, oh, no, we gifted you this. You cannot let it go bad. So they go back and take their own money, millions of dollars, to come and refurbish it for us, right? Right? But there are people managing it. So where's the accountability? Where's the responsibility? Where is the process that we now know that the people managing it are up to scratch? Right? Because as I said, this framework is about consequence literacy, mindset awareness, mindset literacy, meta awareness. Because you see, when you do that, you might sort of think, well, another school of thought, oh, well, it's because they've kept the money. Okay, all right. But now let's look at what does that mean for you? Because you who've kept the money, you live in a community where your electricity doesn't work most of the time, right? Your water doesn't flow properly. You have galamsey where, you know, anybody now is just trying to dig gold, like illegally, destroying the water bodies, where right now we have situation, if we're not careful, getting water to drink from here is going to be difficult, right? So we effectively
Really?
destroying. Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
wow.
Right. So you have to ask yourself the question, this, if I'm just using an argument, a school of thought, if it is corruption. So you take all that and then what is the money for? You understand me? Because together with all these other factors, you're destroying your very existence for the people you love. And I've no doubt you love your children, you love your family. I've no doubt. But my argument is that your outcomes, your actions tells me the opposite. What you're doing, the outcomes is the opposite of that. And this is where this framework is going to help us be more aware, because we give away our agency. Because you forget the Chinese are human beings like you. Yeah, there's no difference, right? So how can they respect you as people? You understand me? Because they must look at you and think, well, yeah, I'll let you fill in the blanks.
Yeah, embarrassing.
And there's even situations where people can come with a great idea. Plagiarism is an issue. And in the book, I map it. It starts in the classroom, where in the classrooms, you have cheating, which is normal. It's been normalized. So that child goes into their early professional life, and they go into a situation where, again, there's all sorts of malfeasance going on. So he or she becomes part of that until they get into a position where they have authority, right? So you have a situation where what is happening is so damning. And for me, I gave an example in the book where you look at Spintex Road, which is one of the major hubs here. And I drove down it 4 years ago. And I remember when I got to where I'm going, I said, gosh, what are we doing? And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, look, I've driven up the most important road in the country and all the factories are foreign owned. I said, it shouldn't be. it should be owned by local people. This is planning. That is how you create jobs. That's how you keep wealth circulating in your community. But
Exactly.
what we're doing, they're repatriating the wealth. We give them tax breaks, right? And then they take all the money away. I said, why would you do that? You understand me? So, and these are questions that I'm just saying, that, look, people need to reflect on that. Yeah. And you have
Yeah.
to understand what is the root cause of all that. Yeah. Because for me, it just doesn't add up. Because you cannot go anywhere outside the world where anybody just gives away their agency, which is what happens, right? So why are you doing that? There's got to be a root cause. I trace it back to colonialism. The sooner we can accept and deal with that, the better it is for us.
Okay. Yeah, good points there. Really good points. Well, the last thing we're going to do is have a look at your LinkedIn where you said you're restarting, like you're regenerating yourself, and you want people to look at you in a different way. And you had 5 slides, and I want you to talk me through these five slides. I'm going to
Okay.
share the page.
Yeah. I saw a posting by a young lady who was talking about things like this. So I said to her, I messaged her, I said, oh, I'm going to take up your advice. And she said, yeah, go for it. So there we are. So,
So this is the first slide. Please talk us
yes,
through.
right. So if you look at the top left, you can see CMS, which is the book, the Consequential Management System, but it is a framework. It's a governance innovation, and it's called CMS. And the idea is that over time is going to be words that are on the lips of everybody. I believe this governance innovation is something that can even be scaled across the world. I
Great.
think it's a good thing. Yes. And then there's hashtag consequence generation. I mean, participatory governance. I want to see participatory governance. And I've got the AI, the technology tools that I'm now looking for partners to help me build. And I'm looking for catalytic investors to help me be able to do these things. So as you said, why I'm here now. Yeah, so I talk about I'm restarting my LinkedIn journey with a purpose. Yeah,
Good.
and then I sort of I do talk about it. Yeah. Okay. So here you're seeing bridging global finance and African transformation. And then I want to obviously give some credibility in terms of I understand finance. I've already mobilized investments into the continent. I've worked in investment banking. So design CMS for governance renewal, right? So this is where I talked about impact bonds, where for me, this is a paradigm shift. When we get to that stage where you have an African governance framework powered by the private sector, developing Africa at scale, because we would have signed in with governments. So no longer are government employees able to now control that. Is all being done in the private sector. Yeah, but transparently and accountable. Okay. So this slide, Africa stands at a crossroad, and that's what it is. You know, we can repeat old failures or reclaim originality and agency. CMS is an originality. The whole thing about CMS is to reclaim our agency again. We had it, we just need to reclaim it. And also we sit at that bridge, as you talked about, There are some old leaders who've been there for so long, they don't even remember when they came in. But then there's still a lot of new, new leaders who are invigorated, they are inspiring, and we need to make a choice. Even the old leaders can make a choice. I know we now need to do better, and I'll be happy to send them a book. Yeah. Right. Now, this one here, CMS, a new pathway. So fusing African metaphysics with modern management science, and that's what it is. And the mindset awareness, consequence literacy, and then impact implementation. Impact implementation is basically how you implement. Once you've dealt with the mental, the psychological part of it, we now need to do the physical work. And the book talks you through that. Yeah, so this is my why, to spark conversations about agency, stewardship, and consequence literacy. Yeah, so she also told me that, don't worry, the first ones will not get as much, interaction, but you got to keep going. Yes, and I've got to make it a little bit more engaging as well. Hopefully that's engaging enough.
Okay. Can we give examples where good government really exists within Africa, where development is happening? I mean, I can think of a few places.
Yeah.
I would say Botswana, Rwanda,
Yes.
Burkina Faso. Am I right?
Yes.
Or are there other
Yes. You're
places that you can also
spot
give?
on. Yeah. Botswana, Rwanda, Burkina Faso. I think now Ghana too. I think the leader is very, very what's the word? Reinvigorated. He came in 2016. And I think, it was very, lukewarm, but he's coming reinvigorated, really looking to work with transparency and accountability. So there is a lot of momentum too, I think, that is being built here. So I'll add Ghana to that. I think across Africa, I think there are some others as well, but they need a bit more work. But if you look at it, there are 54 countries. We've mentioned 4, right?
Yeah.
So that tells you the amount of work that needs to be done.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, I mean, for instance, in Nigeria, there may be local governments which are actually doing well.
Yeah.
But when you look at the country as a whole, I mean, Nigeria is a massively rich country,
Yes.
and yet
Yes.
so many of the people are living in poverty. And
Yes.
as we mentioned before, so much of the country still has no electricity.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know if the country is capable. I don't know if the leadership is capable of really making real change. I don't know.
Yeah. I think that what Africa too is seeing, and I mentioned this in the book, is that it's either the leadership, the old leadership, because you had the ones who fought for independence in the 50s, 60s. A lot of them have died out. And you've got the middle ones, and now there's a new generation who are asking for more evidence of development for themselves, for their family. So I think leaders need to really begin to see the shift and embrace a framework like this, because the youth are getting very agitated. And I think you've
and I
seen
don't
Kenya.
blame them. And I
Yeah,
don't
you've
blame
seen
them.
Kenya. You saw what happened in Kenya a
Yeah.
year or two ago, and things like that. And that, is just a question of time if, things don't change. And that's where this governance framework is something I think people should grab and implement.
I think even with the health situation, I saw some stats the other day that talked about food which is being eaten, which has poisons. Either they're GM foods or they're being grown using weed killers or fertilizers, which are toxic for humans. And
Yeah,
to think that Nigeria still has a life expectancy of 52, a lot of that is because of what's being eaten. So you're eating a bag of beans and you think, yeah, beans are healthy, but then, all the poisons which come with that bag of beans is causing low life expectancy. And although, yeah, lots of babies are being born,
yeah,
the older ones, the wiser ones, are dying off too early, and that is a problem, a huge problem.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, Nigeria is a massive economy. Um, that if you do business there, you're more likely to do well because there's so many customers, so many people to sell to, right? Um, but I think in terms of governance, you see, look at it this way. And again, I have this conversation with people, and I always say that the leadership issue in Africa, African governance, is not about competency, really, not about capability, but rather the system where the colonialists, when they left, in order for the colonialists to control, what they did is create a small elite, right? So they will always look at who was powerful, who is difficult to defeat. Okay, let's look for people that they don't really get on with and then make them the leaders, right? So now you have, yeah, that's what it did. So it pits, so you're focused on fighting each other. Yeah, instead of fighting
Yeah,
them, right?
indeed,
So
indeed.
what happened is when they left, the elite then also then so, oh, we can get all these benefits. And they began to live like the colonialist was living, right? So what then happens is that it becomes almost like a friends and family. So sometimes there are people sitting in positions that they lack the depth that is required to sit there. So there's impact, negative on millions of people. This is
Mm.
the issue that exists in Africa. Because if you look in the West, if you look at America, some of the top finest doctors or people, bankers are Nigerians.
Mm.
Yeah. Ghanaians. Look at UK. A lot of Ghanaians, Africans do very well. Yeah.
Mm.
So
Yeah, they do, absolutely.
yeah. So that is not the yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to finish off by putting your article. It's quite a short article, but it summarizes, where you're planning to go with this book and why it's needed. I will leave it on the screen as we finish off. But thank you
Yeah.
so much for the interview today. I think it's eye-opening in a number of ways, some of which we knew, but it's actually
Yes.
nice to be able to condense the information around
Yes.
African development in a
Yes.
conversation, and maybe it will give people some ideas as to what they can change. Because I've got to say, some of the things you mentioned could help in terms of corporate development, business
Yep.
development, you know, because even as a small business, we want to
Yes.
have good governance.
Yes.
We don't want to
Yes.
have intellectual dishonesty. We
Yes.
also don't want to repackage shallow ideas. We want to go deep.
Yes.
We want to be
Yes.
intellectual with what we're doing.
Yes.
We
Yes.
don't want to give up too soon. We don't want to
Yes.
abandon momentum. And we
Yes.
don't want to keep chasing the next short-term fad. you
Yeah.
know? So I think
Mhm.
those are valuable for any person who's looking at the development of their life, their business, their organization. as well
Yes.
as Africa and the African people around the world. Thank you for what
Yes.
you produce. I hope
Yes.
that it will be effective. And please come back again, maybe in a year's time, and tell us how you've
Yes.
changed Africa.
Yes. Thank you so much, Don, for having me. And
You're welcome.
I look forward to speaking soon. All right,
All right,
then.
take care. Bye bye.
Cheers. Bye bye.